My name is Kenji. I work as a quantum physicist at a research facility that most people have never heard of. We've spent the last 6 years building a time machine. Not the theoretical kind, the real working time machine. I'd been at the lab for the last 16 hours straight, making adjustments to the temporal calibration. My supervisor, Dr. Harwell, had already left an hour ago, leaving me to finish the tweaks. I was about to finish my work when I suddenly saw the machine working abnormally. It was consuming energy even though it was turned off, and I remember a portal opening by accident. I don't remember anything after that. When I woke up, I found myself near a beach. I was covered in sand, my skin feeling like it was burning, and it took several seconds of pure panic before my brain caught up with my body. I was alive. I could breathe, crawling up a beach that looked like it had never seen a human footprint. The sun was high. I had no idea what time it was. I sat on the sand for a long time, just breathing and feeling dizzy. My watch was still on my wrist, miraculously. The time was 2:47 p.m. I got to my feet and started walking. The island was small, densely forested, and completely empty of civilization. No structures, no paths, just trees and rocks and the constant sound of ocean. I found fresh water in a stream and drank until my stomach hurt. The sun was starting to move toward the horizon when I heard some voices. And within seconds my mind went crazy that I wasn't alone in the island. At first I thought they were shouting. Then I realized it was purposeful, the sound of people working. I moved toward it carefully, climbing up a ridge to look down into a valley. The settlement was small but organized. Maybe 100 people, maybe more. They wore animal hides stitched with sinew. They carried spears and crude tools made of bone and stone. There were structures that might have been shelters, a fire pit that was actually smoking. My brain instantly guessed Stone Age. Had to be. No metals, no pottery visible, no agriculture that I could see. Just survival. Just people who hadn't figured out anything beyond the immediate next meal. A hunting party was moving back through the trees, and they saw me before I saw them. There was a moment of absolute stillness, all of us trying to process what we were seeing. Then one of them pointed, and they started running toward me. I ran the opposite direction, which was stupid because there were more of them coming from that way. I was surrounded in seconds. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more, closing in with spears raised. I put my hands up because it seemed like the thing to do when people with sharp weapons were treating you like prey. They didn't kill me. They just grabbed me, voices shouting things I didn't understand, and started dragging me back toward the settlement. By the time we arrived, the entire tribe had gathered. They stood in concentric circles around a central fire, watching as the hunting party pushed me forward. An older man stood at the front, taller than most, scarred across his chest and shoulders, wearing more elaborate hides than anyone else. He studied me the way someone might study a problem they didn't know how to solve. The man asked something repeatedly, his tone patient but confused. I tried to answer in English, which was useless. I tried gesturing, which didn't help. They had no reference point for what I was or where I'd come from. The sun was getting lower. The tribe was getting restless. I could feel the shift in mood, initial curiosity turning into something harder. The chief was consulting with the village elder now, having what looked like a serious conversation. One of the younger men was gesturing toward the spear, maybe suggesting they just kill me and be done with it. That was the moment I realized I was actually going to die if I didn't do something. I was about to shit my pants with fear, and suddenly I had a nasty idea, even though I wasn't sure it'll work or not. But at least it's better than doing nothing. My hand reached into my pocket slowly. No one stopped me, they were too confused about what I was doing. I pulled out a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, the tribe observing very carefully. I put the cigarette between my lips, held up the lighter so they could see it. Then I flicked it, and the flame appeared in my hand. The reaction was instantaneous. People gasped. Some took steps backward. The chief's hand came up, but not in threat, in something closer to reverence. I put the lighter to the cigarette and took a drag, exhaling smoke like I'd done 1,000 times before. Like I wasn't absolutely terrified, while I was trembling with fear. The tribe was backing away now, making room. Whispers spread through the crowd. The elder said something, and as soon as he finished, someone knelt. Then another. Then the chief himself, slowly, deliberately, bent one knee. Within seconds, the entire tribe was on their knees. I stood there with a cigarette in my mouth, trying very hard not to let my hands shake. 50 sets of eyes watched me like I just descended from the sky. I was looking absolutely ridiculous, terrified and trying not to show it, playing at being something divine when I was just a tired scientist who'd accidentally traveled through time. But it worked. The cigarette tasted like survival. I took another drag and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The kneeling lasted less than a minute before the fear turned into confusion again. People kept staring at the lighter in my hand like it might explode or summon lightning. A child hiding behind one of the shelters pointed at the cigarette smoke curling out of my mouth and immediately buried his face into his mother's side. The chief stood first. Everyone else followed after him almost immediately, which meant hierarchy already existed here. I could work with that. The elder stepped closer carefully and pointed at the lighter. I closed it instantly. The tiny flame disappeared with a click. Half the tribe flinched. That reaction alone told me everything I needed to know. Fire here wasn't convenience. It was survival itself. The elder said something slowly while pointing between me and the lighter. I had no idea what the words meant, but his tone sounded cautious now instead of hostile. The younger hunters still looked nervous. The chief motioned toward the center fire pit. I understood that much. Slowly, I walked forward while dozens of eyes tracked every step like I might vanish into smoke at any moment. The village smelled like ash, wet hide, and cooked meat. The shelters were arranged in a rough circle around the central fire. Primitive but not random. Everything had purpose. Sleeping areas stayed farther from smoke. Food scraps were piled away from the huts. Spears leaned together in organized bundles. These people weren't stupid. They were surviving with what they had. The chief sat near the fire and gestured for me to do the same. I lowered myself carefully onto a flat stone across from him. The entire tribe gathered around us again. No one spoke. Then the elder tossed a small bundle of dry grass and wood into the fire pit before pointing at me. He wanted me to do it again. Honestly, I wanted to refuse. My lighter had limited fuel, and once it ran out, my little god act disappeared with it. But refusing now probably looked suspicious. So I reached into my pocket again. The entire tribe leaned backward at the exact same time. I almost laughed. Click. The flame appeared. A wave of whispers spread through the village instantly. This time I held the lighter closer to the dry grass and lit it slowly so they could watch the process. Fire crawled through the pile until smoke rose into the evening air. The reaction changed immediately. The first time they were afraid. Now they were fascinated. The chief stared at the burning grass for several seconds before looking back at me with an expression that had clearly shifted from caution into respect. One of the hunters suddenly stepped forward and shoved a broken spear toward me. The shaft had split near the stone tip. Apparently the village had already decided my new role. Problem solver. I took the spear carefully and inspected it. The stone tip itself was fine. The binding was terrible. Loose strips of dried hide wrapped unevenly around the split wood. I pointed at the damaged area, then motioned for more binding material. Nobody moved. Then one of the girls stepped forward. She was around my age, maybe younger. Sharp eyes. Long dark hair tied tightly behind her head. Unlike everyone else, she didn't look nervous around me. Just curious. She handed me a strip of animal sinew. Probably the chief's daughter. I nodded once in thanks and crouched near the fire pit. The tribe closed in around me immediately. I adjusted the split wood first, then heated the sinew slightly near the fire to soften it before wrapping it tighter around the shaft. Cleaner. More pressure. Better hold. Simple fix. But to them, it probably looked like I was performing surgery. When I finished, I handed the spear back. The hunter tested it once, frowned, then pushed harder against the ground. The shaft held perfectly. His expression changed instantly. A few people started murmuring again. The chief took the spear himself next. He examined the tighter binding carefully before speaking to the others in a low voice. Whatever he said changed the atmosphere completely. People started bringing things toward me. Broken tools, cracked handles, loose bindings. I looked around at the growing pile beside me and almost burst out laughing. An hour ago I was helping calibrate a time machine. Now I was running the world's first repair shop. The sun disappeared completely while I worked. Someone handed me cooked meat at some point. Another person brought water in a carved stone bowl. Nobody pointed spears at me anymore. The tribe had accepted something very important. I was useful. The sharp-eyed girl stayed nearby the entire time, watching everything I did. Every knot, every adjustment, every movement. The second girl appeared later, quieter than the first. She crouched beside the repaired tools silently, studying them with calm attention while everyone else focused on me. The two girls exchanged a glance. Very different personalities. One looked ready to challenge me. The other looked ready to figure me out. By the time the fire burned low, I had repaired 7 spears and 2 stone knives. Not exactly the future of human civilization. But considering I was supposed to be dead a few hours ago, I counted it as progress. The chief finally stood and pointed toward an empty shelter near the edge of the camp. Mine, apparently. As I walked toward it, people moved aside to clear the path. Not out of fear this time. Respect. Small, cautious, confused respect. I stepped inside the shelter and sat down heavily against the wall of woven branches and hide. The lighter was still in my pocket. Half a pack of cigarettes remained. And somehow, against all logic, I had survived my first day in the Stone Age. The next morning, a crowd was gathered near the fire when I stepped outside. A child lay on the ground beside the elder, barely moving. His mother was crying while the elder rubbed ash across the boy's stomach and spoke under his breath like that was supposed to help. I crouched beside the kid and checked him quickly. Loose motion, severe dehydration, weak pulse. Honestly, I was surprised this didn't happen more often. The entire camp was a disaster from a hygiene perspective. Dirty water, half-cooked food, spoiled meat sitting in open air, everyone touching everything with unwashed hands. The kid probably drank contaminated water and his body just gave up. If I didn't do something fast, he was dead. I stood up immediately and grabbed 3 stones from the edge of the fire pit. After pushing them into the flames, I balanced one of the curved stone bowls over them. Primitive stove. Good enough. Then I pointed at the water container nearby. One of the hunters handed it over. I poured water into the bowl and waited for the fire to heat it. While I was setting everything up, the sharp-eyed girl from yesterday walked over and stopped beside me. The chief's daughter. She looked at the child, then at me. I pointed toward the forest. She understood instantly and grabbed a spear and followed me. Having another pair of eyes wouldn't hurt. The forest was thick and humid. I moved through the plants quickly, crushing leaves between my fingers, smelling them, checking the sap. The girl watched the entire process with a confused expression. Honestly, I couldn't blame her. To her, I probably looked insane. I ignored most of the plants and kept moving until I found pure source of sugar and glucose. A plant nearby had thick roots and a clean earthy scent when snapped open, which I knew contained sugar. I collected some more fruits and leaves on my way. The girl crouched beside me and touched one of the leaves carefully before looking at me like she was trying to figure out how smelling random plants connected to saving a dying child. I pointed toward the camp. She nodded once. We ran back. By the time we returned, the water was boiling. I crushed the leaves and roots together using a flat stone until the mixture turned into rough green paste, then dropped all of it into the hot water. I pulled the bowl away from the fire and covered it using a large washed leaf while it cooled down. The child's parents were staring at every movement I made. The elder had stopped his ritual completely. Once the water cooled enough, I lifted the child carefully and gave him a small amount first, along with some berries. A few seconds passed. No vomiting. I gave him more slowly while preparing thin soup beside the fire using watered-down meat broth and crushed roots. The goal wasn't to heal him instantly, just stop his body from collapsing. The girl stayed beside me the whole time, watching everything closely. Every plant, every movement, every step. After a while, the child's breathing started evening out. Still weak, still exhausted, but no longer getting worse. His mother noticed first and grabbed the father's arm so hard he nearly dropped his spear. The elder leaned closer to the child with a confused look on his face. Probably because the boy was supposed to be dead already. I sat back beside the fire and wiped sweat from my forehead. Yesterday I was working on a machine designed to bend time itself. Now I was in the Stone Age making medicine with leaves and boiled water while an entire tribe watched me like I understood secrets beyond human knowledge. Honestly, this was getting ridiculous. The child was awake the next morning, sitting beside the fire with his mother. The child's survival changed the atmosphere of the camp. They watched me like they were waiting for the next miracle. I stood near the fire for a while, watching the settlement wake up around me. Hunters prepared their spears. Meat from yesterday's hunt still sat uncovered near the shelters. People grabbed food with dirty hands, drank water from the same stone bowls, then passed them to someone else. This kid survived. The next one might not. If I wanted to survive here long-term, I couldn't keep solving problems one person at a time. And that only worked if the tribe's hygiene improved first. I needed soap. Also, I needed a way to store clean water. The quiet daughter was near the stream gathering plants when I approached. She looked up at me calmly, then stood and started following me. We walked deeper into the forest looking for flowers and plants with strong oils and scent. White flowers growing in clusters. Purple petals that left residue on the fingers when crushed. Small pink flowers with a surprisingly clean smell. We gathered as much as we could carry. Back at camp, I brought animal fat from yesterday's hunt and melted it inside a heated stone bowl over the fire. The quiet daughter stayed beside me the entire time watching closely. I scooped clean ash from beneath the firewood and mixed it with water in another bowl. After letting the ash settle, I slowly poured the clearer liquid into the melted fat. The mixture thickened almost immediately. The quiet daughter leaned closer. I crushed the flowers into the mixture one handful at a time. The smell changed completely once the oils mixed together. Cleaner and sharper. Almost familiar. For a second it reminded me of my normal life. I kept stirring until the mixture cooled enough to harden. After a while, the first rough bars were finished. The chief picked one up and smelled it carefully. He didn't react much, but he kept the bar in his hand instead of putting it back down. That was enough. I took everyone to the stream afterward. The chief came. Both daughters came. Several hunters followed behind us. I washed my hands with water first. The water showed no real difference. Then I used the soap. Grease and dirt lifted immediately from my skin and floated into the stream. One of the hunters grabbed the soap almost instantly and copied what I did. He kept scrubbing long after his hands were already clean, staring at them like he couldn't believe the difference. The others followed after that. By midday, nearly everyone in the settlement had washed their hands at least once. But the bigger problem still remained. The water itself. The tribe only collected what they needed at the moment. Stone bowls worked for carrying water short distances, but nothing here could actually store it safely. Everything was temporary. I sat near the fire drawing a circle into the ash. A rotating motion, then a pot beside it. The sharp daughter crouched beside me watching silently. I spun my finger around the circle again. Her eyes shifted immediately toward the round grinding stone near the fire. I went looking for the elders after that. Most of them stayed near the edge of camp. Age had pushed them out of hunting. Most people stopped paying attention to them. But experience doesn't disappear just because someone gets older. I sat beside one of the older men and drew the same circle shapes again. I also drew a pot. He stared at the drawing for a long time before slowly standing up. Then he motioned for me to follow him. We walked through the forest until he stopped beside a large flat stone buried deep into the ground. The moment I saw the shape, I smiled. Perfect. Getting it out took almost the entire afternoon. More people joined once they realized we were trying to move something important. Hunters dug around the edges while others used wooden branches to pry it upward little by little. The old man stayed nearby the whole time, directing everyone with short gestures. Once the stone was finally free, he started smoothing the surface himself using another stone. Nobody interrupted him. The entire camp watched quietly while he worked. His hands moved slowly but precisely, shaving rough sections down little by little until one side became flat enough to rotate cleanly. That was when I understood something important. These people already had skill. What they lacked was direction. By evening we built the frame using thick branches and a sharpened wooden axle through the center. The first spin wobbled badly. The second was better. By the third try, the stone rotated smoothly enough for clay shaping. The old man stepped closer and placed his hand against the edge, helping maintain the spin while I pressed wet clay onto the center. The shape changed immediately under rotation. The walls rose evenly instead of collapsing. A few people gasped quietly. The old man stared at the clay for several seconds before looking at me with something close to disbelief. Then he sat down in front of the wheel himself. The first attempt collapsed immediately. He started over. Second try lasted longer. Third try became a bowl. Not perfect, but standing. The sharp daughter immediately tried next and nearly destroyed the entire thing by spinning the wheel too hard. The quiet daughter laughed while the hunters standing nearby tried to hide their own reactions. By sunset, 7 clay pots sat drying near the fire. And the next morning, the chief himself filled them with boiled water and placed them beside the shelters carefully like they were treasures. Clean water, clean hands, proper storage. The camp suddenly started feeling different. Not bigger or stronger, just smarter. By this time, I started recognizing a few of their words. Just the ones repeated often enough. The ones connected to actions. I learned that the chief's name was Craig. The tribe elder was Ruck. I heard people say it with respect, the way they deferred to him when he spoke. The sharp daughter was Ari. Nia was the quiet one. The child I'd saved was Kai. His mother said the name countless times. I was starting to exist in their world instead of just moving through it. The hunters started preparing for the hunt. Craig sent them toward the forest with spears, expecting a normal hunt. But after an hour or two, they returned empty-handed. The settlement went quiet. People watched the hunters approach with faces that meant something had gone wrong. Craig and Ruck exchanged a look. They spoke quietly near the central fire, their voices low enough that only the two of them heard what was said. Ruck nodded once, then twice. Then he stood. The tribe gathered. Ruck said something, a long string of words I didn't understand. But the tone was clear. Plan. A solution. They started moving in circles. Slowly at first, then faster. They were chanting something rhythmic, something that repeated. Voices overlapping. Hands raised toward the sky, then raised toward me. A woman was on her knees, speaking in a soft, pleading tone. They were performing a ritual. They thought the god was unhappy. That's why the hunting had failed. They were trying to appease me. Ari was among them, moving with the others, but her eyes stayed on my face, trying to read my expression. Nia looked away, like she wished she could explain. One of the hunters approached me carefully, like I might strike him. His name was Vex. He said something slowly. He made a gesture with his hands, showing the empty space where food should have been. Vex watched my face to see if I understood. I nodded. His shoulders relaxed. Relief crossed his face. The god understood. The ritual stopped. The tribe waited to see what I would do. I looked at Craig, then at Ruck, then at the empty stomachs I could see in the faces around me. I didn't have the words for what I meant to say, so I just started walking toward the forest. Vex followed, then Ari, then several other hunters. We gathered what I needed. Herbs near the coast. I already had knowledge of where those things grew. Herbs that smelled strong when crushed. Plants with sharp flavors. And the most important thing, a large bowl full of seawater. I showed the hunters what to pick, and they collected without questioning. We returned to the camp afterwards. I took some large stone bowls from the pottery area and set them by the fire. Vex helped me arrange stones into a cooking space. The tribe watched silently, waiting. I had already been thinking about fish before this. Unlike hunting wild animals, the river was consistent and predictable. But spears weren't enough. So, I started making something else first. A harpoon with bones. Light. Barbed edges carved to prevent escape. Simple but durable. Wrapped tightly with animal sinew. Far better than stone spears. Vex watched carefully. So did the others. I started walking toward the river near the camp, and most of them followed. The water was cold. I stopped near a cluster of rocks where fish had gathered. And being the hero, I went first, but after a couple of tries they were trying very hard to guess what exactly I was doing. I failed to catch anything and decided to leave the hunting part to the professionals. The moment I handed the harpoon to Vex, he caught a large fish on his first try. Then Ari, then the others, everyone caught something except me. By midday we had more than enough. The hunters carried them back. Their expressions shifted from resignation to something closer to amazement. Back at camp, I first extracted the salt from the salt water by boiling the water. I cleaned the fishes using river water and a stone knife. Ari watched me do this, watched how I removed the bones and prepared the flesh. Nia brought me herbs. Vex arranged the cooking fire exactly how I gestured. I placed the fishes in the pot, added salt, added the herbs, covered them with another bowl to trap the heat. The smell changed as the fish cooked. It became something else, something rich, something that made the entire tribe turn toward the fire. The first person to taste it was Vex. His eyes went wide. He chewed slowly. Then he looked at the fish like it was something divine. He tried another piece. Then he called out something, probably telling the others that the god's food was different. By sunset, the entire tribe was eating. Craig tasted it and kept eating. Ruck examined the cooked fish like it was a tool he needed to understand. Ari ate without speaking, but her eyes stayed on the cooking area like she was memorizing the process. Nia brought water and sat near me while I prepared more. Kai's mother gave him small pieces, watching his face light up at the taste. The camp felt different that night. It was clearly written on their faces that they just found someone reliable who can solve all of their problems. But I was already planning my future. The fact that I can't stay here forever started buzzing in my head, but I also knew no matter what I did, this is what my destiny chose for me to be. The reality hit even harder when I realized I can't build another time machine here to travel back in my time. And like that, a few days had passed. By now, I understood most of what they said. Not all of it, but enough. When Craig called out orders, I knew what he was doing. When Ari asked something, I understood the question. When Ruck explained something to the elders, I caught the meaning even if I missed individual words. The settlement had changed too. People had learned to preserve food underground. Dried fruits, smoked meat, stored vegetables. Simple methods that would keep things fresh through lean times. The pottery system was working. The fishing was consistent. The hunting had improved. Everyone moved with less urgency now. There was time to rest. Time to sit by the fire without worry. Craig sat with me one evening and said something that took a moment to translate in my head. Something that meant the tribe was safer because I was here. The tribe was comfortable, but it didn't last. The storm came around noon, and it came without mercy. The sky gradually darkened. One moment the air was normal, the next it was alive with pressure and movement. The violent wind arrived first. Sudden, carrying dust and debris. Then the heavy rainfall. The tribe scattered in panic. Cave was the only place for them to take shelter in this weather. Everyone moved toward it, the designated spot where they'd escape when weather turned bad. But watching the settlement destroy itself was different. The tents collapsed like paper. Water pooled everywhere. Tools scattered. The carefully organized storage areas were chaos within minutes. Structures that had stood for weeks came apart in seconds. By the time everyone was inside the cave, the settlement was in shambles. The cave was large enough to fit everyone, but not comfortably. People were pressed against each other. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air was cold and damp. Some people were shivering. Children were crying. I stood near the entrance, watching the storm rage outside, watching the destruction of everything we'd built. Craig came over and stared out at the destruction. His expression barely changed. There was no anger in his face. No surprise either. Just the quiet acceptance of someone who had seen this happen before. That's when I realized something. I'd been planning to improve the tents anyway. The constant exposure to weather bothered me. The lack of proper shelter frustrated me. I'd been paranoid staying under those tents, wondering when a storm would come and what it would destroy. Now the decision was made for us. I turned to face the tribe and called everyone to gather after the storm had passed. They came slowly, confused. "We'll build a stronger and better camp," I said, using the words I knew. Craig's eyes sharpened. He understood. I drew the plan on the floor, a design of the new settlement, and started dividing them into teams. I knew we had more than 100 people who can contribute in this, and I needed all the help I could get. 20. I pointed to the strongest hunters to get clay, and I added as much as you can get. They nodded. 60. I gestured to the next group, women, younger men, people who were strong but not the strongest, and assigned them the task to make clay bricks. They understood the work. 20 more. I pointed to a smaller, organized group. Move clay. Move brick. Keep working smooth. The system was clear in my head. Clay carriers. Brick makers. Distribution. No one idle. No one standing around. We started working immediately. The clay pits were not that far away. The 20 hunters started bringing the clay back on large animal hides. They would spread a hide across the ground, pile clay onto the center, then grab the corners and carry it between them. It was working, but slowly. The pile of clay wasn't growing fast enough for 60 people to work continuously. I watched for an hour. The problem was obvious. Transport. Hand-carrying clay was a bottleneck. The hunters were exhausted. They were the strongest people in the tribe. If they burned out, the whole system collapsed. I needed to move large quantities fast. That's when I remembered the 2 pottery wheels. Round, flat, perfect. 2 of them could become an axle for a cart. I took the experienced workers Vex, Ari, and 3 others who'd worked with me before. We gathered materials from around the destroyed settlement. Wooden shafts, branches. What we needed was already there. They watched as I positioned the wheels on a wooden axle, securing them. Then I showed them the frame, wooden branches lashed together to create a platform. Ari understood first. She moved to help secure the joints. I used thin leather strips to bind the loose corners together. Tight, secure, strong enough to hold weight. Within 30 minutes, we had a cart. I loaded it with clay and pulled it myself, showing them how it moved. How the wheels made it possible to transport 10 times what a person could carry. Vex's expression shifted from confusion to realization to amazement in seconds. He called the other hunters over and showed them. They understood immediately. The wheels weren't just for pottery anymore. The clay transport changed. What had been a slow trickle became a steady flow. The 20 hunters, now using the cart and pulling it together, brought massive quantities of clay. The 60 workers had a continuous supply. I showed them how to shape the bricks myself. They didn't fully understand how it would solve anything yet, but they followed anyway. At this point, they trusted that whatever I built had a purpose. I placed Craig in charge of the brick-making group. The tribe watched this happen. The solution appearing when it was needed, the cart working perfectly, the rhythm finding its balance. For the rest of the day, nobody slowed down. Brick after brick after brick. The stacks kept growing. By sunset, there were enough bricks to build walls large enough to shelter nearly half the tribe. The preserved food became important. Dried fruit, smoked meat, everything we had stored over the last few weeks. Without it, hundreds of people would have gone hungry. Instead, everyone ate. The storm had destroyed the settlement. But by the end of the day, they could already see something replacing it. Something stronger. They were even more surprised when I led the women, children, and elders inside the cave to sleep, and told the men to sleep outside beside controlled fires. The cave wasn't built for living, only survival. Still, no one questioned the decision. They had already started trusting the foundation I was building. The morning came cold. By dawn, everyone was moving with purpose, instead of panic. When I woke up, the whole tribe was already gathering. Craig was organizing the brickmakers. Ruck was overseeing supplies. Vex was preparing the cart. I walked to where the unfired bricks were stacked and called out the others. "These bricks aren't finished," I said. "They need fire to become strong." The tribe had shaped thousands of bricks yesterday, but they didn't understand yet why fire mattered. I started building a firing kiln. Simple structure. Green bricks arranged in a hollow chamber. Space below for fire. Opening to feed wood inside. It didn't take long to construct. Soon the kiln was ready. "Get wood," I said to Vex. "We need a strong fire." Young hunters gathered thick logs. By afternoon, the kiln was fed with burning wood. The temperature inside climbed. The bricks we'd loaded began to change. Pale clay darkened. The color shifted from light to orange to red. The transformation was happening in front of them. Not magic. Chemistry. Heat turning soft clay into something permanent. By evening, I let the kiln cool and showed them a fired brick. Hard, dense, red. Completely different from the pale version they'd been making all day. Craig picked it up, felt the weight. His expression shifted. "This is what fire does," I said, holding up the fired brick and then pointing to the stacks of green ones. "Tomorrow we'll do more of this." He understood. The next morning, I called everyone to gather. I had already prepared the mortar. Mud and ash mixed into a thick binding paste. It was one of the earliest ways people built lasting structures. "Watch," I said. I coated a fired brick with the mixture and pressed another on top, forcing them together until the mortar squeezed out from the edges and locked them in place. "This is how walls are made," I said. "Strong enough to hold weight." I showed it again. Ari crouched beside me and copied my motions exactly. She pressed the brick, sealed the mortar. Her hands understood precision from weeks of pottery work. Nia came over and watched, then took a fired brick and tried it herself. Her movements were careful and deliberate. She was learning not just the action but the reason, the pressure needed, the alignment required, the way mortar sealed gaps. Both of them understood. I turned to Tor. An elderly person stood watching. The same elder who'd worked the pottery wheel, who'd shaped the first clay pots, who was good at crafting. I looked at Tor and asked him to join the work so others could learn from him. Tor didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and took a fired brick. He examined it, felt the weight. Then he took the mortar and started laying bricks the way I'd shown him. His hands moved with precision. Each brick placed firmly. Each gap sealed. Each layer aligned perfectly. Within an hour, Tor had built the first wall. Tall enough to shelter people, straight enough to support weight. The brick-making team watched him do this and understood what they were building toward. Tor stepped back and nodded once. For the next couple of days, the tribe worked even harder. More kills fired simultaneously. Bricks emerged by the hundreds. Pale green bricks becoming hard red. The rhythm that Tor established worked very well. Walls rose. Buildings took shape. With my direction, Tor organized the bricklayers. Craig managed supplies. Ari had started training younger people in the firing process. Nia was organizing the mortar preparation, teaching others the right consistency, the right technique. The knowledge was spreading quickly. The tribe was learning to build. A week later, the settlement was unrecognizable. Where tents had stood scattered and vulnerable, permanent buildings now formed organized clusters. 3 large structures housed shelter for the entire tribe comfortably. A separate building stored food, dry, protected, organized. Another served as the workshop for toolmaking and pottery. The kilns had been moved to a dedicated area away from living spaces. Water storage was centralized near the main buildings. Craig stood at the center of the settlement and looked at what had been built in 7 days. A week ago, the storm had destroyed everything. Now there was something stronger, something that would survive the next storm, and the next. That evening, as the work was winding down and people gathered near the fires, Nia approached me. She was holding something. It was an outfit, leather and hide sewn together with careful precision. The leather was deep brown, almost black in places. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each seam tight, each edge finished carefully. It was nothing like the simple wrappings the tribe wore. It was designed, intentional, made to fit exactly. She held it out without speaking. You made this? I asked. Yes, Nia replied. The first clear word she'd ever spoken directly to me. I took the outfit and examined it. The hide was special, treated somehow, soft but durable. The seams were reinforced. The design showed she'd thought about every detail. Sleeves that wouldn't restrict movement. Fasteners made from bone. Pockets woven into the sides. How long? I asked. Many days, she said. Watching, learning, making. She had been planning this for weeks. Observing what I wore. Thinking about how to make something better. I changed into the outfit. The leather fit perfectly. Comfortable. Strong. When I stood up, the tribe went quiet. I wasn't the man in modern clothes anymore. I was someone else. Someone who belonged here now. Nia looked at me and nodded once. Craig came over and examined the outfit. He looked at Nia, then at me. His expression showed respect for both of us. Ari smiled. Even Tor came to see, and he ran his weathered hand along the leather seams, recognizing the skill it had taken to create it. The tribe had seen me transform not just their world, but accepted me becoming part of theirs. The settlement was thriving. A week had passed since the buildings were completed. The structures stood solid. The food stores were organized and full. The kilns were producing fired bricks continuously. The tribe moved through their days with purpose and confidence. Everything was working. The hunting party left at dawn. Vex led them with a dozen experienced hunters following. The forest was good for hunting. Water was nearby. They'd be back by evening with enough meat to feed the settlement for days. If I'd known what was waiting for them in those woods, I would never have let them go. By late afternoon, one of the hunters stumbled into camp alone. His arm was bleeding. He collapsed near the central fire. Nia rushed to help him up. Craig was there almost immediately. Ruck followed behind him, and Ari appeared moments later. I was there within seconds. What happened? I asked. The hunter's name was Grom. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wide with something between fear and shock. They came, he said, struggling to catch his breath. From the north. So many of them. Who? Craig demanded. Another tribe. Large. Maybe 200 warriors. They were hunting. They saw us. Grom paused, gathering breath. Their settlement was destroyed. Like ours. Everything gone. They saw us with full baskets. They saw our direction toward our settlement. He looked at me. They followed us. When we tried to go back, they blocked the path. Their leaders asked me, "Where is your settlement? How do you have so much food? How are you so organized?" "What did you say?" I asked. I said nothing. Vex told me to run. He stayed. The other hunters stayed with him. They said they would hold Vex and the others until you came. Craig's jaw tightened. They said they would hold your strongest hunters. They said if you came to trade, they would negotiate. They said if you refused. Grom paused. Vex would not return. The camp went silent. The other tribe had lost everything to the storm. They'd seen our permanent structures from a distance. They'd seen our food supplies. They wanted what we had. And when they couldn't understand how we built it, they took the people who could explain it. I looked at Craig. They had a choice, I said quietly. Everyone was watching me. If they came to us and asked how we built our settlement, I would show them. If they asked for food, I would give them enough to help them recover from the storm. If they asked respectfully, I would teach them everything. We could have helped them rebuild. I looked back at Grom. They had every opportunity to come peacefully. Instead, they chose force. I turned toward the forest, toward where the other tribe waited with Vex. Now they'll see what that choice costs them. I didn't sleep that night. The first thing I needed was coal. Normal fire wouldn't reach the temperature required to work iron properly. I spent the night making it. I built a fire pit and loaded it with dense wood. Then I covered it partially with clay, restricting the oxygen, letting the wood char instead of fully burn. By midnight, I had charcoal, dark and dense. By the time the sun rose, I was already 2 miles from the settlement. I'd noticed the dark red earth during my earlier explorations weeks ago. Iron-rich soil, exactly what I needed. The ore deposits were there, untouched, waiting. I gathered what I could carry and returned to camp. Craig was waiting. I set the ore down near the fire and started building a smelter immediately. Simple structure. Clay furnace with coal below for heat. By afternoon, the ore was heating in the intense coal fire. The smelter glowed red throughout the day. The coal burned hotter than wood ever could. But the ore didn't separate easily. I adjusted the heat, shifted the coal, added more vents. After hours of adjusting, raw metal finally emerged. Crude, dark, heavy, but undeniably iron. I didn't know yet what to do with it, so I started simple. I heated a piece of the metal and shaped it using stone tools. Heated, hammered, cooled. The metal responded to the heat and pressure. It bent, it shaped, it hardened. By evening, I had created something basic. A knife, simple blade, rough handle, but unmistakably a knife. I tested it against a piece of stone, the blade cut clean. No breaking. I tested it against bone. Cut through without resistance. I held it up to the firelight. The tribe gathered around, watching. I handed the knife to Craig. He took it carefully and felt the weight. The sharpness. He tried it against a piece of wood. The wood split in two instantly under the metal blade. His eyes widened. He handed it to Ruck. The elder examined it, ran his finger along the edge carefully, understood immediately what this meant. Within minutes, everyone had touched it. Everyone had tested it. Everyone figured, this was different. This was powerful. This was something they'd never seen. Vex's absence weighed on me more than I had expected. Even surrounded by the tribe, the settlement somehow felt quieter without him. The next morning I found Ari and said, I need more ore. As much as you can carry. Take young hunters. Use the cart. Bring it back as fast as possible. She understood the urgency and left immediately with 6 hunters, the cart already moving. Then I found Ruck and told him that I needed arrow shafts. Straight wood, pointed at one end, split notch at the other for the string. I grabbed an arrow from a nearby hunter and showed Ruck. Arrow making was familiar to him. What I needed was volume and precision. Ruck nodded and gathered younger workers. The repetitive work moved fast. Within the hour, dozens of arrow shafts were complete. Next, I found Craig. Metal points, I said. For the arrows. I'll show you how to make them. I heated metal and shaped it into a simple point, small, sharp, deadly. I showed him the process. Craig examined each one carefully. He understood the concept. I'll make more, he said. Craig's team was producing metal arrowheads in batches. Then I started looking for Tor, the elder craftsman. I drew the rough shape of the weapon I had in mind in the dirt and explained how it was supposed to work. Tor studied the drawing for a long time. He didn't understand every detail yet, but he understood what we were trying to build. When Ari returned with ore, Tor was already working. I fed the new ore into the coal smelter and shaped what I could while the metal was hot. The first knife had taught me how iron responded. But my hands were slower than what was needed. I brought the raw metal pieces to Tor. His hands were different from mine. Steadier, more practiced, more patient. He heated the metal, hammered it, and shaped it again and again. Each piece slowly became smoother, more refined, and stronger than before. By dawn, all 3 metal components were complete and refined far beyond what I could have created alone. Craig had gathered ash wood for the stock. Tor examined it, approved it with a nod, and began shaping it into the body of the crossbow. His hands moved with confidence. The cuts were exact. The curves were perfect. By nightfall, the wooden stock was complete. Tor brought it to me and I showed him where each metal component attached. By midnight, the first crossbow was complete. I loaded an arrow shaft, one with a metal point created by Craig's team, and showed Tor how to use it, how to pull the string back, how to trigger the release. I aimed at a tree 30 meters away and squeezed the trigger. The arrow shot forward with a sound nothing like a bow. It embedded itself deep into the tree trunk, the metal point buried in wood. The tribe that had gathered to watch went completely silent. Craig stepped forward and examined the arrow in the tree. His hand traced the hole the metal point had made. Craig looked at the crossbow in my hands, then at me. Tor was already examining the first crossbow, understanding how it functioned, already planning how to improve the next one. Meanwhile, Craig's team continued making metal arrowheads. Ruck's team continued making arrow shafts. The entire settlement was working toward one goal. Tomorrow, I said, we will get him back. The night was cold and the fires burned bright as Tor worked on the second crossbow. His hands moved with absolute focus, understanding the mechanics now, improving on the design with each one, working faster than I ever could. The other tribe had taken our people because they saw our prosperity and couldn't understand it. They had no idea what was coming. By dawn, they would face something Stone Age warfare had never encountered. The next morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to let Vex sit in that camp another day. I was going to resolve this with absolute clarity. I found Ari and Craig before dawn. I need both of you with me, I said. Do exactly as I tell you. No matter what happens, stick to the plan. Neither of them questioned me. We moved through the forest as the sun rose. When we reached the edge of the other tribe's settlement, I led Ari and Craig behind a line of large boulders overlooking the camp. From there, they had a clear view of the open ground without exposing themselves. I walked directly into the camp alone. The other tribe's warriors saw me immediately. A lone man walking toward them without fear. Their leader stood up. His confidence was visible. I stopped in the center of their gathering space. I've come to take Vex and the hunters with me, I said calmly. Release them now. The camp erupted in laughter. Their leader stepped forward. He was larger than Craig, broad-shouldered, carrying a long stone spear. Around him stood nearly 200 warriors. He looked at me, then behind me. A smile spread across his face. You? Alone? You come to our camp with no warriors and ask us to give up prisoners. More laughter. I smiled. Let me show you something interesting, I said. I slowly raised my hand and pointed toward a large stone bowl resting beside one of the shelters. For a brief moment, nothing happened. A few warriors chuckled. Then a sharp crack echoed across the camp. The arrow hit the bowl dead center. The impact was catastrophic. The stone shattered violently, exploding into fragments. Pieces flew everywhere. Water sprayed. The entire camp went silent. Warriors jumped to their feet, confused, searching for where the arrow came from. I stepped forward and my voice was different now. If I have to ask you one more time, none of you will stay alive. Some warriors looked genuinely terrified. Others looked at their leader, waiting for a signal. The confidence slowly disappeared from the leader's face, replaced first by uncertainty, then by anger. He raised his spear and charged directly at me. I pointed my finger at his legs. Something cut through the air with incredible speed. The arrow hit him in the thigh. He screamed and collapsed immediately, blood pouring down his leg. He fell hard, his spear flying from his hands. He started pleading, crying out for mercy. I looked at one of the other hunters. Bring Vex and the others, I said. Untie them and bring them here. I glanced down at their wounded chief. The hunter ran immediately. Within minutes, Vex was brought forward. Bruised, beaten, but alive. The other hunters behind him also battered but standing. I looked at Vex and saw the relief in his eyes when he recognized me. The ropes were cut immediately. Vex looked at me and smiled. I knew you'd come. I untied the last knot around his wrists and said, Let's go home. Then I turned to their leader, who was still bleeding, still on the ground. I crouched beside him and said, If you ever lay a finger on my people ever again, I'll chop your head off without thinking twice. His eyes went wide. He shook his head frantically. Never, never again. I swear. No one from my tribe will ever. I stood and turned away. We left the camp with the other hunters. Ari and Craig emerged from the trees and joined us without speaking. On the way back through the forest, Vex came and walked beside me. I knew you would come, he said. I told the others. I said Kenji will come. I didn't respond, just kept walking. When we reached the settlement, The entire tribe was waiting. Craig's face showed relief. Ruck was excited. Ari smiling. I brought Vex and the hunters to where I kept herbs, showed them which herbs to use for the bruises, which ones for the pain, how to wrap wounds. Nia appeared with water and helped tend to them. By evening they were resting. Within a few days the bruises began fading. By the end of the week, every hunter had recovered. Life slowly returned to normal. 3 days later, one of the lookouts spotted strangers approaching. The settlement immediately became alert. Hunters picked up their weapons. Craig stepped forward. But as the figures drew closer, nobody attacked. They carried no spears, only bundles. When they reached the edge of the settlement, they placed everything on the ground. Fresh meat, animal hides, stone tools, dried berries. The leader of the group lowered his head. "Our chief sent these," he said quietly. "He said he regretted his decision and wishes to rebuild the relationship between our tribes, and asks if you would accept trade." Silence settled over the camp. I looked at the gifts, then at the frightened messengers. "Tell your chief," I said, "that a hand offered in peace will always be welcomed." The messenger nodded. As they disappeared back into the forest, one thought stayed with me. Civilization had just taken its first step. If you made it so far, please like the video and subscribe for the next part. I'd really appreciate it.